We are excited to let you know that OTB Sports will be broadcasting full live commentary of all 9 matches from the British and Irish Lions tour of South Africa. Brian O'Driscoll and Alan Quinlan will be alongside Neil on commentary for the 3 test matches, with Devon Toner, Niamh Briggs and Jack Carty amongst the co-commentators for the warm-up games. Up next, it is the Sigma Lions versus the British and Irish Lions on Saturday at 5 p.m, live on Newstalk. Our coverage is brought to you in association with Vodafone, lead partner of the British and Irish Lions. You excited for this one tomorrow, Neil?
Yeah, Eoin, I'm most excited for how on radio I am going to frame the Lions have the ball versus now the Lions have the ball, what way I'm going to do that. So I've a bit of thinking to do between now and 5 p.m. tomorrow. I'm going to try work something out, get a little list of synonyms I could use. You know, oh, the tourists have it. Oh, the hosts have it. You know, the British and Irish side. Warren Gatland's men have the ball. The South Africans are in possession now. Just try and mix it up like that. So look, if you are listening in tomorrow, make a little tally of all the various descriptions I use to announce which team have the ball. Because if I just keep saying Lions in possession, we could be in for a very messy afternoon. It's going to be a very one-sided game.
Yeah.
The Lions just dominating possession for the entire 80 minutes.
Is it fair to say that the thing you're most excited about in this is seeing Eoin Farrell and Finn Russell combine for what could be a fairly explosive, exciting partnership?
Almost. To be honest, the one I'm most excited about watching tomorrow is going to be Lewis Rees-Zammit.
Sure.
Because I just think he's an absolutely electrifying player. I was lucky enough to get to see him live in, what was it, December 2019. So he was only still 18 at the time. And I absolutely did not know much or anything really about him going into the game. I remember doing my commentary notes in the lead-up to that. It was Connacht against Gloucester at Kingsholm in the Heineken Champions Cup. And I remember saying, okay, there's this 18-year-old kid starting that day actually for Gloucester. And it turned out he was absolutely unbelievable. And had it not been for COVID hitting last year as well, he probably would have got his chance earlier on in the Six Nations in 2020 as well, and would have made his debut roughly just after turning 19 years of age. But I think within a couple of weeks of this year's Six Nations, he was one of those players that had gone from being a potential bolter a couple of months back to being an absolutely nailed on. He's going to be in the wider Lions squad within the space of a few weeks, because he's just so skillful. He's an absolutely outstanding finisher. Is able to read the game so well for such a young player as well. So look, he's one player I'm absolutely seriously looking forward to seeing as well. And you would really think he does have an absolutely brilliant chance of making the test side as well. I think he'd be I remember reading during the week, he would be the youngest test starter since I think Tony O'Reilly many moons ago to start a test game for the Lions. But aside from that, to go back to the original point, Finn Russell at out half and Eoin Farrell outside him, that is the spine of a pretty stellar backline that the Lions are picking tomorrow. The downside is we don't have as many Irish players involved. It's only going to be Ian Henderson and Bundy Aki available off the bench. It was probably inevitable after we had all 7 of them playing last weekend. But the idea of, like, Finn Russell, exciting at the best of times, but there's just an element of safety when you have someone like Eoin Farrell just outside him as well. You kind of feel like you're kind of able to have your cake and eat it, you know?
Yeah, I know. So what sort of constellation are you looking at in this backline then? Is it fair to say that it's kind of like jerseys up for grabs once again, or how are you seeing things set up? Is there a world basically if everybody plays well that Farrell, Russell, Stuart Hogg could all play in the one starting team?
I definitely think it's possible. I certainly do. I think the out half / centre combination is really up for grabs, and I think over the next few weeks, like we would have seen it last week, where traditionally, like, it's all about just trying out the combinations as much as it is giving the individuals a chance to shine. Like, I think a lot of coaches, they will earmark the potential combinations they have in mind, and we would have seen it last week. Robbie Henshaw and Bundy Aki is a very obvious centre combination because it's been tried and tested many times for Ireland. And I think maybe leading up to just after the squad was announced, there was probably the there was a fair idea that it seemed like Dan Biggar was probably going to start at number 10. Robbie Henshaw was going to be in the centre with one other player. But then you're kind of wondering, okay, is it a centre combination of Eoin Farrell and Robbie Henshaw, where Warren Gatland probably wants a second ball player in the centre. If you have Robbie Henshaw and Eoin Farrell, you have two ball players in the centres as well as your out half. Chris Harris is someone who bolted in from the outside, really, really strong defensively. Probably isn't as exotic an attacker as other players, but a very, very capable and competent defender and a very, very strong defender. It looks like a backline that has the bit of magic with Finn Russell at 10, but also a very, very solid combination in the centre of Eoin Farrell. So I'd definitely curious to see how that combination, that partnership of Finn Russell and Eoin Farrell will go tomorrow. And I think it could be absolutely excellent.
If we allow ourselves to put on our green-tinted spectacles for just a moment, do you feel threatened by Courtney Lawes at 6? Does Tadhg Byrne feel threatened by Courtney Lawes at 6?
I'd say you probably would, to be honest, yeah. And for good reason, because he's an excellent player. And the fact that there's so many ticks in the Courtney Lawes box, I would say, because he's someone that Warren Gatland clearly trusts from 2017. He had an excellent tour, played in 2 of the 3 tests back in 2017. He's like Tadhg Byrne and even someone like Maro Itoje. He is that kind of Swiss Army knife of a player where you're just as comfortable playing him at number 6 as you are if you play him in the second row as well. He's an enormous tackler. He's like hugely physical, probably more physical than Tadhg Byrne, I would say, which when you're playing against South Africa, that is another massive tick in the box. And the fact as well that he's the 37th man in the touring squad, I just think is really interesting, because he didn't get to play much in the Six Nations. He was carrying injuries, hasn't played much this season at all. But the fact that Warren Gatland pulled so many strings to make a 37th spot available because he wanted to add Courtney Lawes, I think that says a lot about the intentions he has for the player, and that he's always going to be a viable option when it comes to picking the test team. I think it's a really, really nicely balanced back row as well, just in general for Saturday, between himself, Hamish Watson and Talupe Faletau.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Courtney Lawes is... Personally, I'd probably have Tadhg Byrne starting in a test back row, but it kind of depends what way you want to go to. I think Tadhg Byrne, if you're looking to win ball on the ground. Courtney Lawes, though, if you want to physically get on top of South Africa, is going to be definitely an option. I'd absolutely see him being on the bench, though, if he wasn't starting in the test.
Should be a really interesting battle for that shirt. On Ireland then, Neil, there's a whole host of really interesting storylines going into a game that maybe not a lot of people a few weeks ago thought that would be overly important. First of all, you're looking at the team sheet and you're like, that's a bloody exciting team. And I immediately want to see how this goes. But we should start with James Ryan. He captains the team against Japan tomorrow. Is this just a really quick recovery?
Yeah, I actually really don't know what way to call it. It's so hard to get a gauge on whether or not he has made a fast recovery, whether or not Warren Gatland wants to pick him anyway, because to do that, you would have to get into the mind of Warren Gatland, who has over time proved himself to be one of the most unpredictable head coaches in sport. So I think if you're trying to get into his head, you're off to a loser straight away. I've gone back and forth over this the last couple of days, or since yesterday, since Ryan was announcing the team. I really don't know what way I'm looking at it, because on one hand you're thinking, Andy Farrell suggested anyway, at least, that Warren Gatland had been onto him sounding out James Ryan. Now that could be Warren Gatland ringing up Andy Farrell to sound out James Ryan. He might have also got in touch with Rob Baxter to ask about Johnny Gray after the Premiership final. He obviously also got in touch with Wayne Pivac to ask about Adam Beard. Maybe he sounded out 5 or 6 different candidates before deciding who the ultimate one was. Maybe it's also that James Ryan didn't, he felt he was overlooked for the Lions and is doing everything in his power to make sure he was on the pitch this weekend. I think that is also an option, that he didn't get the call and decided, I am pushing through the pain barrier here. I'm going to play no matter what, and I'm sticking it on proving a point this weekend. I really do not know what way to fall down on it, because as I said, you're trying to get into the head of war in Gatland, and that's an impossible job.
This side in general then, that back row, Peter O'Mahony, Van der Fleer, Caelan Doris, like this is, again, I'm not sure, maybe it's like once you get to the second test in this summer, it'll be a much more weakened side. I just didn't expect to, it's almost jarring to see a Lions tour happening concurrent to a team that's stacked with Irish players. That back row in particular just looks ridiculously strong.
Yeah, it does, and I think there's definitely a lingering bit of a resentment off the back of 2019 in the team selection here, that look, they only have 2 games this summer. They've 12 or 13 uncapped players in the wider squad. I think a lot of people would have expected to see more than just Gavin Coombs being in line to make the debut this weekend, and I think that probably speaks volumes to the fact that they just want to put down a mark against Japan, and they want to make sure they get a win. It's obviously not going to make up for the 2019 World Cup defeat, but I think for a lot of players there's probably a point they want to prove to themselves. I know plenty of them weren't involved in the World Cup, but I think there probably just is a resentment there over the way the 2019 game went. For the squad Andy Farrell has over the last couple of weeks, it's probably as experienced at 23 as he could have picked. I know on the bench you have a few guys with 1 or 2 caps, Shane Daly and Craig Casey, but in the starting 15, like Peter O'Mahony and Josh Van der Fleer, James Ryan, Dave Kilcoyne, Jacob Stockdale, and looking at even someone like Jordan Larmour, who's up around the 30 cap mark now as well. There's plenty of experience in that starting 15. And in fairness to Japan, like, Ireland are showing them massive respect, because having seen them play last week against the Lions, like, they were very, very good in parts. You could just see that they had the bit of rustiness about them that they hadn't played since the 2019 World Cup, and in parts they were just sluggish and slow. But overall, they still had so much of the things that made them great in 2019. Huge ball carriers, really, really willing to have a cut and have an offload and bring the game to the opposition. I think in particular their back row is absolutely outstanding, and it's stacked with ball carriers. And the way they're going with a 6-2 split on the bench, like, I thought Michael Leach at Blindside last week, I thought he had a poor enough game, their captain, and I was expecting maybe Kazuki Himeno to come in, who was unbelievable for the Highlanders this season in Super Rugby, and was excellent when he came off the bench last week. I think it's probably just maybe a bit of, they're probably just keeping him rested after a long season. He was straight back in after a long season in New Zealand. They have huge ball carriers in the back row, and I think that would be an area of concern for Ireland. Probably why they've had to go so strong with the likes of Peter O'Mahony, Josh Van der Fleer and Caelan Doris. And one final bit then as well, obviously we're all just so excited to see Gavin Coombs getting a run for Ireland as well. I think that's going to be a massive moment for him when he steps out there tomorrow afternoon. Fully deserved. Maybe some people might have said it's it's overdue given the season he's had as well, but I think he's going to be a huge player to be able to bring off the bench and add some beef into that back row for the last 20 minutes. I certainly don't see an Ireland walkover by any stretch of the imagination tomorrow. I think it actually could be a cracker of a game.
It does seem, and maybe this just goes with the territory of there being a tour concurrent to the Lions tour, but it does seem that there's a hell of a lot of Irish players with a point to prove, and it's like there's going to be no lack of incentive on a multitude of different positions there. We should mention as well South Africa are playing against Georgia as well, so we'll get a bit of a read on where they're at. Shifty Lad has been back in touch to say, I'm going to try and sync play up to your commentary. That's enough of a compliment I can give, he says.
Good man, Shifty Lad.
Just look out for the Lions versus the Lions. Shifty Lad, keep a tally of how many times Neil says Lions and drink for every time Neil says Lions. That's the only way through. But it's going to be a mad Saturday of sport.